Welcome and thank you for joining us. This is Wellness and Nutrition with Dr. Markovic. Today's video we're going to be talking about basic meal composition and bringing together a lot of the things that we have just learned in our previous videos so we can put together a pretty basic but healthy meal for all of ourselves. Let's check it out. When it comes to basic meal and basic meal composition, I think a good way to explain it is kind of relate it to a pizza. Now what we're going to do is have slices of pizza. All 8 pizza slices come up to one big meal. But they're going to be broken down into our nutrients and our macronutrients like we were talking about as how we're going to compose that meal. When we talk about fluids like we just talked about in the previous video, that's going to be part of, like we talked about, how much sugar content is or isn't is based off of if you have a free drink versus if it's added onto your carbohydrates. Same thing would be encompassed in fruits. Keep in mind most fruits have simple sugars in them. The more sugar, that is a carbohydrate, so that is tabulated with your carbohydrates. So simply just because you're having fruit or just because you're having maybe a sugary drink, you have to factor that into your overall carb intake. Now generally speaking, for most people, really the amount of carb that you should have encompasses 2 slices. So carbs should really only be 1/4 of your meal. So if you think of your plate, you're just going to have a small portion of carb that's there. You would want a portion size. This could be any carb that you would like. It could be rice, it could be a potato, pasta, noodles, macaroni, grits, oatmeal, whatever you choose, that's your prerogative, but make sure that it's portioned to only encompass 1/4 of your meal. Now the other fourth we're gonna have here is a protein product. So that would be anything along the lines of a lean meat, typically is what most people do. So a fish, a turkey, a chicken, or something like that. Now you can still have things like red meats or lamb or things like ham. However, you just want to limit the amount that you have those products to probably no more than once a week, if that, just because of the massive amount of sodium content that those foods have naturally. So that's why things like bacon, although tasty, is naturally salty and will unfortunately increase that blood pressure. So 1/4 of this meal should be a lean meat or a protein. Protein also you can have as a vegetable. Now the other, as you can see, 4 slices of this really should be vegetable or anything that has a lot of fiber to build bulk. And this is where a lot of, with your protein and your fiber, you can add in a little bit of fats as well. So how you make that protein would be important. So let's say you're having something like a piece of chicken, but you're also gonna put a little bit of sauce on top of it. Okay, if it's a little bit of a fattier sauce, that is okay because we're not adding fats to the rest of our meal. Same thing with the vegetables here. You're gonna wanna be cognizant of how you're actually making that vegetable. If it is, let's say, deep fried or anything along those lines, it really defeats the purpose of having a healthy vegetable because that is now all a saturated fat, as opposed to having things like steamed vegetables or having them baked. Another good product that's available nowadays is air fryers that do help us kind of get that flavor of fried and that crispiness of fried without actually having to deep fry things, which is definitely a godsend for people that love fried food such as myself. So with these vegetables and these fiber products, that's gonna help build up a lot of that foliage and get that person full and feel full. Fibers, or even those, and again with the carbs, trying to go for those complex types of carbs would be most beneficial, so it slows down the amount that your body is able to digest those foods, thereby keeping you fuller for a longer period of time. And then more importantly, when you do become hungry, you're not starving for food. You will not eat everything in sight as much as you would just say, yeah, I guess I could eat now, I feel a little bit hungry, which is a consistently different thing than being starving. Now that's just a very simplistic way of doing things, but if you think of it as 4 slices of a vegetable or a fiber, 2 slices of a protein, 2 slices of a carbohydrate, you can apply that general concept to most of your meals. And if you do that, you will see that overwhelmingly, your weight really won't fluctuate too much, and you will feel generally fuller for a longer period of time. When we get to future videos, we're gonna really be going into a lot of the details in terms of exactly which carbohydrates you can pair with fats and which vegetables, in terms of how you would do that with working out or how you would do that on a non-workout day, and then how that relates to potentially other health disparities like things like hypertension, diabetes, high cholesterol, and things of that nature. We're going to be getting that on future videos, but for today's video, the most important takeaway is to really limit that carb to no more than 2 slices. So like we talked about on those previous videos, portion size that carb. Look at the back of that nutritional label and look at the top so you make sure that you're not having more than you actually think. You want to measure those things. Now with your protein, if that protein ends up being a 3rd slice instead of just 2 slices, like we talked about previously, your body will urinate out the majority of that protein if there is excess. So this is where you can actually play around a lot with what you have and be more liberal. If you have this whole entire meal and you are still hungry after that meal and it's not satisfying, to be clear, please do not have seconds of carbs. You do not need any more of those. You don't need any excess of that, as opposed to you would need more vegetables and more protein, because that will help you keep you full and it will not make you necessarily gain any more excess weight. Again, we're going to be going this in more detail in future videos, but please do take this to heart and really do your best to make sure that you are aware of exactly what's going in your body. Don't assume anything, measure it out so you know 100%. And that concludes today's video. This has been Wellness and Nutrition with Dr. Markovic. And as always, be well and be well to each other.